Hey, it's another tutorial today. Today I'm going to be creating a brush from scratch in Procreate. I'm going to be creating a spatter brush, and I'm going to be talking about how I use this. I've used this in some of the drawings that I posted in a speed draw the other week, and a couple people asked me how I got that texture. So I'm going to be walking through that and walking through how to create brushes in general in Procreate. Now, I cover brushes really in depth in my Udemy class on Procreate about mastering Procreate and going over everything in this program. So if you really want to know Procreate inside and out, I'd recommend you check that out. Right now, I'm offering that at 50% off. Link down in the description. I'll end the ad there and let's start this tutorial. So first things first, creating a brush is very easy, and you've probably found it already. If I just tap on the brushes, it's going to pull all of these brushes up. I have a brush group already. Up at the top, it says Brad's brushes. This is where I put my custom brushes, where I upload some other people's brushes that I've gotten online. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making a brush like this one. I just called it Blah, but basically it is a nice little scatter brush, and I'm going to show you how I like to use that to add texture to my drawings. So let me undo that, and let's start from scratch. So I tap on these brushes, and in the upper right-hand corner of this palette, there is a plus button. What that is going to do when we tap on it is it is going to create a new brush from scratch. It is called Untitled Brush, but I can call this whatever I want. I'm going to call this Brad Splat because that seems like a good name for it. So once I'm done with that, I'll just put the keyboard away, and there are two things that make up a brush. You have your shape that you're selecting, and you have your grain that you are selecting. Now, you can, we'll just tap on one of those, and I'll show you what happens. We can pull an image, a reference image that we want to use for our brush from anywhere. So you can pull it in from iTunes, like if you import it from your computer. If you already have something in your photos, perhaps you've taken a picture of a texture you really like. We can import from a cloud service. That's over here. I have iCloud connected to that right now. It's telling me it's unsuccessful because I canceled it. Let me try that again. Select shape. I want to focus on the thing in the middle that says Pro Library. The really cool thing about Procreate is they really encourage you to make brushes, and one of the ways they do this is by actually giving you a lot of resources to get started with. So the brush I'm going to be creating today is going to be just using the resources that come built into Procreate. So I'm going to tap on Pro Library, and you can see here I have a ton of options as I scroll. So what I want to do is there are several splatters in here. There's one here called Flakes. There's one called Flicks. That one's not too bad. There's orbs. There's short hair. I think I'm going to go with that one called Flicks up above. There's another water flicks over here. There's a spray paint one. So you can see there's a lot of stuff here, and it just keeps going and going. Let me go back and find the one that I liked. Actually, I think I passed it up here. Let me see, Flicks. So I'm going to select that, and there we go. That is my shape source. Now you can also add a grain source. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to go back to the Pro Library, and I want something with a little bit of texture to this because it adds a little bit of randomness to this. Charcoal block might work out pretty well. Charcoal soft might work pretty well. Really what I'm just looking for is something with a good hard texture to it. Actually, there's some really nice ones. We could go with a sketch paper, a canvas. Actually, this might work pretty well. Okay, so I've selected those two things. Let me go back to source so you can see them. I've got my shape source and I've got my grain source. So right now, if I use this brush just by default, it would work like a brush. It's taking that pattern, and it is just kind of, if that pattern happened to be at the end of a paintbrush in real life and I was applying it, this is what would happen. It would kind of smear. But I don't want that. I want it to be more random and more dotted. So let me undo that. Let me go back to that brush, and let me start playing with the settings a little bit. And I'm going to start by going to stroke. Now we want to make this more random. So I'm going to start by going to this little third thing down, which is called jitter. And as you can see, as I max it out, now we're starting to see it kind of become a little more random, less straight lines. So I just kind of want to get it to a point where I think it looks pretty good. I want to get a nice soft edge on it. So here it's too much like a brush. Here it's just too wide. I think right about there is really what I'm looking for. And while I'm here, I could play with some of these. Spacing is the distance between those patterns actually showing up. I actually don't need that. In fact, I could knock that spacing down to 0. I think it was right about there. I can knock that down to 0, and it's going to work out pretty well for me. So let's test out this brush. Let's see how it looks. So you can see it's starting to look the way I was hoping it would. So I'm just going to undo that, and we're going to go back to our brush, and we're going to go to our next section, which is shape. Now here we can add a little bit more scatter to it. This is going to make it a little more random. You can see as I play with it a little bit. It's not bad the way it was. I'm just going to move it up a little bit, make it a little bit more random of a pattern so you don't notice it repeating quite as much. So let's move on to our next section, which is grain. And here we can just adjust this even more. If I want the dots to be more noticeable. When I was drawing with it before, you probably saw it's kind of gray. So I'm going to undo that. There we go. Go back here. And by scaling that texture underneath, I can really make that more noticeable. That's probably too much. But what this is doing is it's taking the grain, which is the grain source, which I have over here. That was the second thing I chose, and I'm scaling that up. And that grain laying over that pattern is what's giving me the look I'm looking for. So now when I use it, I'm getting really close to what I want this to look like now. This is very, very close. So I'm going to undo it, and I'm going to go back to my brush. Now, right now, there is one thing missing when I use this brush, and that is it is solid. So no matter how hard I press on my Apple Pencil or how softly I press on my Apple Pencil, I'm getting the same weight. What I really want to happen is I want it to be lighter when I press lightly on the pencil and get darker as I get heavier. That way, as I'm shading, it makes it a lot easier to shade with it. And in order to do that, we are going to go to pencil, which is down here along the bottom. Now, the very first thing here on pencil is opacity. So let's see what happens if I turn that up. Yep, that's kind of what I'm looking for. I'll move it up there, and this is looking the way I want it to look. So let's test out this pencil one last time. If I press lightly, I get this nice light thing going on. As I press harder, it gets darker. That is exactly what I want to happen when I use this brush. So this is the splatter brush I'm looking for, and then I can add a second layer here, and I can start to get, a good texture going on. So this is what I'm looking for. And so now I actually have a brush that I like that I could use. I could scale it down. So if I want a smaller version of it, I have it. If I want a really big version, I have it. So I'm good. So next up, I want to show you how I actually use this in an illustration. Okay, so I have my drawing here, and right now all it is a bunch of flat colors, set up on the canvas. So I haven't added any texture or anything to it yet, and I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to walk you through this process a little bit using this brand new brush that I just put together. So I have all my layers here, and while I was constructing this, I put everything on its own layer. So you can see I can toggle these things on and off. There we go, like that branch is on its own layer. I've got the leaves on their own layer. This big background circle's on its own layer. The clouds are on their own layers and everything. So I thought that through. I wanted everything to be on its own layer for now. And the reason why is I'm going to show you in a second. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by shading this bird. So I'm going to hit the plus button to create a new layer. This layer is sitting over my bird layer here. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to find that scatter brush. So there it is, Brad Splat. I'm going to select that. I'm going to grab some white. Actually, I have it right there. Now I have my brush. I'm going to increase the size of my brush. I can change the size over here on the left. Probably get it to about there. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to add this white highlight to the top of my bird. And at first, I'm just kind of applying it, and then I'm going to get heavier and heavier as I go. And I'm going to really kind of get to the top of the bird and almost go white on him as I get to the top. So there we go. That's on there. Now, clearly, I have overlapped the bird shape. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on layer 3. That holds the shape of my bird. And then when I close my layers, in the upper left-hand corner, there are several things. There's gallery, there's the wrench, there's the magic wand tool, and then we have this little S. That is my selection tool. So if I tap that, down at the bottom, a little toolbar came up. There's freehand and automatic. Now, freehand lets me draw a selection. And if I was going to erase, I could only erase the things within that selection. I don't want to do that right now, so I'm going to undo that erase. And I'm going to try again with this selection. Now, freehand was what I just showed you. I want automatic, and automatic is going to let me select based on a color. And since I have solid colors here, this is going to work out really well for me. So I tap anywhere outside of this blue shape, and it's going to select that. Now you see this bright blue color showing me that I have just selected something. That bright blue is where I can draw and where I can erase. So I'm going back to my layers here. I'm going to shift back to layer 37 where I drew that white splatter. And what I want to do is I want to now erase. It's going to be very easy for me to just go in here and erase out everything I do not need. So that is going to come in really handy here because I can do this very quickly. And you can see I'm only left with the white splatter on the blue shape that I was going for. So now when I deselect that I can either tap the S, I tapped the arrow accidentally, but if I tap that S again, it's going to deselect it for me. And now I've got that nice white splatter on there. Now it's a little too pronounced. I don't want it to be that intense, so I'm going to open my layers again, and I'm going to play around with the layer opacity. There's a little letter N on every layer. That N right now means normal. If I tap on that, I can change my layer adjustments. There's some things down below. Usually it starts on darken, there's lighten, there's contrast. I'm looking at contrast because I want to set this to overlay. Now with white, I don't see a ton of difference with overlay. I'm going to use black to add some shadows to the bottom of this bird in a second. I will. But I'm also going to just adjust the opacity here. Maybe I'll pull that opacity down to about 50% or so. That seems about right. Just enough to get a highlight at the top of that bird. So now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to create a new layer, and this time I'm going to just grab a nice black color, and this time I'm going to add shadows to the bottom of this bird. So I'm just going to come in here, add that, and then I'm going to slowly get darker as I go. And again, I'm doing the same thing I did up top. I'm getting some of his wing in here, which is more than I want. Actually, why not? I'll just color in his wing a little bit. Maybe get the bottom of that wing darker. So there we go. That is a mess. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to select layer 3. I'm going to grab my selection tool. I'm going to click outside of that blue area. So now you see this is that bright, bright blue. This is the area I'm going to be erasing. So now that I got that, I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to switch up to that black layer that I laid down, grab my eraser, and just take all of this out just really quickly here. So there we go. Cleaning this up really nicely here. I might be a little sloppy because I'm moving fast for the sake of the tutorial. Whoops. And there we go. And now I'm going to do the same thing with that overlay. I'm going to open my layers. I'm going to tap on the letter N, which brings up my options. I'm going to go to overlay and watch the color change on me. Now it's changed to this nice shade of blue. I could adjust the opacity on that, maybe down to 60%. And there we go. I'm starting to see that texture on that bird start to show up. And I'm just going to continue to do that process over and over again. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to let the speed drawing play out so you can see how it finishes up. So I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to grab my brush. This time I'm going to shrink my brush down because I want to do a little bit more detail work. And I want to get underneath his beak here a little bit, and I want to add some shadow there. Because of the way the light is hitting him. If the light is coming from this upper left hand, that's a terrible arrow. That upper left hand side, there's going to be a shadow under that beak. So there we go. That looks pretty good. I'm not going to bother with the selection tool. I've gotten pretty good with the eraser, so I can just come in here and clean it up by hand. I am pretty good at this, but I don't want to ruin it since I'm recording here. There we go. That looks nice and clean. Now I go in here. I'm going to set this to overlay, and there we go. That's That's what I'm looking for, an even darker shadow on that beak. So I did that quickly. I might want to redo that if I was gonna play with this some more, but for the sake of just kind of showing how this brush works, how we can add that kind of texture in here, that's what I'm gonna do. So that's it. I'm gonna speed draw through this, and I'll see you in a couple seconds with the finished product. Bird, that's what I'm gonna call this drawing. So that's how you do it. All you see here is that I've applied a lot of texture, I've changed the transparency on a lot of things, I've just tried to crispen up some of the areas where I want more contrast, and I've faded out other areas where I want a little bit less. So that's all there is to it, and that's all there is for this tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. And again, if you're interested in learning more about Procreate, I've got that offer in the description as well. Thanks for watching, guys.